Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to the second hour of news and views on Salam Media. The time is 7 after 9 o'clock South African time. And a reminder that this hour of news and views is sponsored by Africa Muslims Agency, a beacon of hope to communities for over 35 years in Africa and beyond. So, welcome. We're now going to be crossing over to the UK and we will be talking, I presume it is the UK, we will be talking with British-Palestinian academic and political analyst, Dr. Azzam Tamimi, and this is a tribute, a legacy that strengthens Hamas in the fight against apartheid. And of course, we're talking about Yahya Sinwar's assassination. He died fighting Israel. His death will not defeat Hamas. Assalamu alaikum to you, Dr. Azzam Tamimi. You are based in London, so I was correct when I said you're in the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Interruption there. We've had a power outage. We hope that we can resume without any more disruptions. We were talking, of course, of the martyr Yahya Sinwar, and also that we do know Israel has succeeded many times before in almost decapitating the movement, that is the movement of Hamas. Yet it has not managed to weaken its resolve. Let Welcome to you, Dr. Azzam Tamimi. Your thoughts on these latest developments, the martyrdom of Yahya Sinwar.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you for hosting me. Yahya Sinwar knew that this was going to be his fate one day. I mean, most Palestinians in Gaza, especially now under these circumstances, know that they have no option but to continue to resist the invading occupation troops, or just die like anybody will die. And I think from the Israeli point of view, the way Yahya Sinwar passed away was very disappointing, because they would have preferred to portray a different picture of him to the world. And actually, because of the leaked pictures early on, he's become an icon, actually a global icon, from Japan all the way to North America, from Canada all the way to South Africa. People are now printing his pictures or depicting him as a freedom fighter. And I think this will strengthen the movement and boost the struggle, rather than achieve any result aspired by Netanyahu.
The pictures show a bullet wound to his head. He was not trying to escape, alhamdulillah. As the apartheid Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu would have wanted the world to believe. And we do know that their Hasbara machine works overtime in all the lies that they spew out. But we know that Shahid Yahya Sinwar died in confrontation with the Israeli apartheid soldiers. He stood face to face, and he was then obviously killed. From a Palestinian perspective, this would, alhamdulillah, be considered the most noble and most honorable of deaths.
Indeed, that's how Palestinians look at it. And this is not the first time Hamas loses its top leader. Since the early 90s, when the movement was still in its infancy, the Israelis targeted activists, top leaders. The founder of the movement himself, Sheikh Ahmad Yassin, was assassinated in 1994. A couple of weeks later, nearly 2 or 3 weeks, no more, his successor, Dr. Rantisi, was assassinated. And every time such an assassination or an elimination of a top leader occurs, the movement becomes stronger and more formidable. The Israelis are pursuing a strategy in the hope of forcing the movement to kneel down, to surrender, to come out with the white flag. And we never saw this at any time in the history of this movement, which came to existence in 1987. And therefore, from the Palestinian point of view, there can be no better way for resistance, a freedom fighter to have his life come to an end.
We do know that Yahya Sinwar emerged as one of Hamas's prominent operatives and was commissioned by the founder of Hamas, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, with the task of setting up a security apparatus known as Majd. One of the objectives was to detect, pursue, and punish collaborators who informed Israeli occupation forces on Palestinian activities within the Strip. And very, very sadly, that is a reality of life, that you will have sellouts amongst and within your own people. He then subsequently served over time, he served up to about 23 years in prison for a whole host of supposed um, atrocities that he was supposed to have committed. Can you tell us more about him and the time he spent in prison and how that further emboldened him as a true fighter of the struggle?
Yeah, indeed. When Hamas was founded, Sinwar was about 25 years old because he was born in 1962. So 25 years old, I mean, today people would consider this to be really young for someone to be asked to set up a special apparatus, a special security agency to pursue and punish collaborators. And Israel used this weapon against the Palestinians, preying on weak individuals, on vulnerable individuals, um, luring them in a variety of ways. So we've always had this phenomenon as this part of the sickness of this segment within any society. I mean, I'm sure that every people who struggled for their freedom had something similar, whether it was in South Africa in the struggle against apartheid, or the Vietnamese people against American imperialism, or the Algerian people against French colonialism, or the Afghani people against American occupation, or the Iraqis for that matter. And that apparatus proved to be really effective because it deterred vulnerable individuals from selling themselves and their people to the Israeli occupiers. But he was soon, I mean, within months, he was arrested by the Israelis and given 3 life sentences. He was sentenced to 3 life terms. But in prison, he made the best use of his time. He learned Hebrew. He acquainted himself with Israeli society. And he translated several books from Hebrew to Arabic and wrote a number of books in Arabic, including novels. He was also a leading figure among the prisoners of Hamas, and was put in charge of managing their affairs and also managing relations with detainees from other Palestinian factions.
He got released from prison as part of a prison exchange with the apartheid Israeli occupiers. And once again, the irony of the situation is that over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners were exchanged for the release of just one Israeli soldier called Gilad Shalit. Um, Once again, this shows the two extremes of the white world and the black world. Black people being, in the eyes of white Westerners, black people seen as inferior to these colonialists all around the world, and it still persists, does it not?
Indeed, and the Palestinian factions have always exploited this rather negative phenomenon. It is negative, of course, when a certain community considers itself to be superior to others. But if they think that one soldier of their kind is worth more than 1,000 Palestinians, then why not then make use of it? And the Palestinians found no other way to liberate their detainees, because the Israelis just detain people, give them very long sentences, sometimes even without trial, sometimes without charging them with anything. And the only way to emancipate them is to kidnap Israeli soldiers and exchange them for the Palestinian detainees. And this was the whole idea of the 7th of October, 2023, which was planned by Sinwar himself, who supervised the execution of the operation, because the prisoners in Israeli detention centers have always been a burden on the conscience of Palestinian society. So they needed to do something about that. And in 2011, there was this prisoners exchange deal that was brokered by the Egyptians at the time. And Sinwar was one of those freed. And immediately after he was freed, he was elected to Hamas political bureau and started holding senior positions, because the man, even though he was incarcerated for about 23 years, he was not really detached from the struggle, because detention itself is part of that struggle, and he lived that struggle throughout the detention years he spent in prison.
Just from reading, hearing all his amazing achievements, one realizes what a great man we have lost in Yahya Sinwar. But undoubtedly, there are many more soldiers waiting in the wings to take over from where he has left off. And you are so correct when you mentioned that Yahya Sinwar was the architect of October the 7th, the attack on apartheid Israel, because this too has been verified by New York Times. They've reported that they came across some Hamas documents which the apartheid Israelis allegedly found in a laptop in Gaza. Sinwar and a very close circle of a few of his comrades started preparing for a major offensive against Israel, supposedly as early as 2021. So that does indicate the greatness, and it also shows how analytical and strategic he was regarding his role within Hamas.
Actually, the most important point in the New York Times report, based on these alleged documents, is that Sinwar and a very close circle of his comrades managed to divert Israel's attention from the preparations that were going on for this major attack on the 7th of October. According to the documents cited by the New York Times, preparations started immediately after the war in 2021, when Al-Aqsa was the major issue. And that's why they called it the flood of Al-Aqsa. And throughout that period, from the end of the war in 2021 until the 7th of October, the Israelis came under the impression that Hamas had already been contained, that Hamas was more preoccupied with providing the citizens of Gaza with food, with medicines, with access to the labor market in Israel. And the effort actually exerted in order to create that impression by, or according to Sinwar's plan, was enormous, to the extent that even though the Egyptians alerted the Israelis that Hamas must be preparing for something, and despite the fact that there were some reports that the Israelis detected certain things, all of this was dismissed as nothing out of the ordinary by the top leadership in the army, in the intelligence, and in the political clique. And it just shows how meticulous, how cunning this planning was.
Alhamdulillah. Um, let's look at, you touched on the issue around Al-Aqsa, and we do know that this is one of the reasons why um, Sinwar and his very close circle within Hamas were really very focused on trying to um, to save Al-Aqsa, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, because we do know that in the year 2021, Jewish settlers repeatedly attempted to storm into Al-Aqsa Mosque, and very many times they managed to do that and carry on with their dancing and singing and all their supposed prayer. And there was even threats very recently that they were going to, I don't know if they carried it out, but they were trying to obtain red heifers to make sacrifices within the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And that is truly a very sore point with Palestinians and us as a Muslim ummah all around the world. Um, we are talking about the legacy of this amazing man, the Shaheed, and that, of course, is Yahya Sinwar. But can we just talk a little bit about what is the situation currently at Al-Aqsa? When last I spoke to Abir Zayad, she indicated that things were getting from bad to worse. Young people were not allowed into the compound and they were being harassed ever more. She said the harassment has just escalated beyond um, reason or understanding. What more do we know about the situation there currently?
Well, indeed, I agree with that description fully. You see, the thing is that we are dealing with an unprecedented phenomenon in the Zionist project. The Zionist project started as a secular nationalistic project. Religion was only used rhetorically to justify the occupation of Palestine. And there's a brilliant book by John Rose called The Myths of Zionism, in which he proves that the founding fathers of Zionism were all secular and atheists. They didn't believe in the Bible, they didn't believe in the Torah, they didn't believe in Moses, they didn't believe in God even. I mean, Ben-Gurion himself famously quoted as saying that I don't believe in God, but if God gave me the land, why not? I will take it. And this continued to be the trend until 1967, when Israel expanded in 1967 and occupied almost twice as much as it used to occupy, more than twice actually, maybe three times the size of the land that it occupied in 1948. They needed to fill this newly occupied land with settlers, and they started encouraging this ideology that led to the current phenomenon known as religious Zionism. It's a contradiction in term, because Zionism, Jewish Zionism, started as secular and atheist. Actually, most of the Jews in the world 100 years ago were totally opposed to Zionism. They considered it to be a European plot against the Jews. They considered it to be anti-Semitic. And I'm glad that today an increasing number of Jews are subscribing to this opinion. But in Israel itself, in occupied Palestine, this new phenomenon was encouraged within the settler movement to bolster them, to reinforce settlement, and to create a generation that truly believes that they have every divine right to do to the Palestinians whatever needed to be done in order to reinforce their presence in the land. Uh, all this talk about them wanting to pray in Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa and build the temple, etc., actually it contravenes traditional Jewish uh, theology, because according to the Talmud, the Jews should never have migrated en masse to Palestine until the Messiah came first and led them there. So they should have been still waiting in the diaspora for the Messiah. But now we have a completely different phenomenon. These Zionists, uh, in the name of God, in the name of the Torah, in the name of Judaism, are committing all sorts of atrocities, of crimes, including the genocide that is being perpetrated in Gaza. And they are so blinded by their arrogance, because they enjoy the unconditional support of America and many of its Western allies, that they cannot see that eventually what happened to the Americans in Vietnam, what happened to the French in Algeria, what happened to the white racist minority in South Africa rule, uh, will also happen to them. This is what they're doing is against nature, it's against humanity, and it cannot last. It's just a matter of time, irrespective of the amount of pain and suffering they are inflicting on the Palestinians.
Dr. Azzam, I'm also thinking you spoke about the Jewish people waiting for their Messiah to lead them to the promised land. They also claim, the Zionists claim, that Palestine was in uninhabited land. The Palestinians don't own the land. This was the land promised to them by God 2,000 years ago. And I'm wondering if Netanyahu, in his very narcissistic thinking, perhaps, and with Ben Gvir and their crowds, are perhaps not thinking that maybe Netanyahu is their Messiah, and that is why this is being allowed, this genocide, this Holocaust, because I think it's reaching the proportions of a Holocaust, is being allowed to be carried out by um, the Americans and the rest of the white supremacist Western society. And when is it all going to end? Who is going to make them stop this madness?
Well, that's why the Palestinians have no option but to struggle and to resist, because the world doesn't respect the weak. If you are weak and you give up on your rights, nobody will recognize you. Name one place in the world that was a colony and then became independent or free, that didn't resort to all forms of resistance, all forms, from the very peaceful to the very violent, simply because the imperialists, the colonialists, will not have mercy on you. They just won't have mercy on you. I remember as a young child how we used to see footage of napalm being used in Vietnam to eradicate entire regions, forests with their villages, with their towns, everything. And this has, I mean, this such violence, such extreme brutality has not started with Palestine. It's always been exacted on the weak, on the vulnerable, and therefore you have to really find for yourself the means and the strength to stand up to them and resist them. Now, what is important to notice here, is that this is not a Jewish project. We are not talking here about the Jews suddenly having a dispute with the Muslims over who has what. This is a colonial project initiated by Europe and inherited by the United States of America. And at different stages of its life, it had different justifications. Initially, it was to solve Europe's Jewish problem. But then, with the passage of time, it became something like a military base that the Americans needed to maintain, military and intelligence base they needed to maintain. And now, more clearly, it is seen as a valuable asset in order to prevent the peoples of the region from standing up on their feet. We saw how Israel collaborated with the dictators in the region in order to destroy the Arab Spring revolutions. They thwarted the democratic process in Egypt. They toppled the first ever democratically elected civilian president in the history of Egypt, and then conspired against the other Arab Spring countries one by one, from Libya to Syria to Yemen to Tunisia. And that is simply because if the masses, if they are revived, if they stand up on their feet, and if they establish proper democracies, there will be no more dictatorships and there will be no more Zionism in Palestine. No Arab people will accept the existence of this occupation in the center of the Arab world, in a place which is so holy to billions of Muslims around the world. And that's why we see this collaboration, constant collaboration between the Zionists and Arab dictators. Actually, Arab dictators now, I call them Arab Zionists.
Absolutely.
They've already joined the club because they feel that they have a common destiny and a common interests with these Zionists. You can imagine what Sinwar was resisting and what the people of Gaza are resisting. They're resisting a project that is global in nature, that is imperialist, that is supported unconditionally by the Americans and the Europeans with the latest killing technology that they have.
To wrap up then, Dr. Azzam, we have about 2 or 3 minutes, 2 minutes in fact. How do you see all of this playing out now? We've seen unprecedented horrors, and I kind of wonder what more to come to shock us out of our wits. But that being said, how long do you, I guess it's asking for how long is a piece of string, post this horror being perpetrated on the Palestinian people? Let's hope, inshallah, there's a ceasefire. How do you suppose things will move forward for the people of Palestine to live in peace, knowing that the genocidal apartheid regime is still their neighbors and will still probably have unlimited powers over them?
Well, today there is so much pain. Tomorrow there'll probably still be so much pain, and for some time to come. But eventually, what is happening is that Gaza, in particular, since the 7th of October, has been awakening the world. And the world needs to be awakened, because if this is a global project, if this is a Western imperialist project, the Palestinians on their own cannot defeat it. They can resist it, they can keep up the struggle, they can maintain the flame of resistance, but the world needs to change in order for the Palestinians to really become free. And we are seeing signs of this. Young students in American universities, in British universities, in universities around the world, people who are today more reliant on the social media and the independent media outlets are educating themselves about the roots of this conflict, about its history, and about what actually is going on. And mainstream media, which monopolized information and the news for many years, can no longer maintain that monopoly. So these are changes that are taking place, and they will take some time to come to produce the desired effect. What really matters here is that the Palestinians, the Lebanese, and the peoples of the region have no other option but to continue to resist this inhumane project.
Dr. Azzam Tamimi, you are based in London. You are the chairman of, I think it's Al-Hiwar TV. Correct me if I'm wrong there.
Correct.
Wonderful talking with you today. I look forward to many more discussions in the future. Shukran very much for your time. Salaam alaikum to you.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
It is exactly 9:43. We're moving on, and of course, moving on to our final interview this Monday morning, and that, of course, is with two guests from Amana. They are managing director, that is Noor Mohammed Habib. Noor Mohammed Habib, and you are going to be joined by someone else on the show. Let's just get that name up on screen, but we will introduce that guest as well. This is News and Views on Salam Media. Please do stay with us for our final interview of the morning.